What unfolded inside the marbled walls of the Supreme Court chamber that day was unlike anything most Americans had ever witnessed. The judiciary, long known for its calculated restraint and deliberate detachment from the passions of political theater, suddenly became the center of a firestorm, and not from within, but from across the divide. Jasmine Crockett, a freshman congresswoman with a rapidly growing reputation for her sharp intellect and fearless voice, stood her ground with a resolve that transformed her into a lightning rod for truth. Her confrontation with Justice Clarence Thomas wasn't just a headline-grabbing event, it was a tectonic shift in how the people's representatives dare to engage with those who were once seen as untouchable. The day began with an oversight hearing that many expected to be another dry session of carefully worded legalese. But even as the session opened, tension could be felt in the way Thomas barely looked up from his bench. It was clear he had already come in on the defensive, perhaps expecting the line of questioning to circle around recent reports alleging questionable ethics, hidden financial ties, and ruling conflicts of interest. Crockett, with her stack of annotated documents, knew exactly what she was walking into. And she was ready. The exchange started with measured words, procedural queries, and a handful of cautious responses. But as Crockett zeroed in on the timeline of Thomas's undisclosed luxury trips funded by GOP mega donor Harlan Crow, his composure began to fray. She pointed out the dates with surgical precision, each reference backed by public records, media investigations, and watchdog reports. Thomas, visibly agitated, snapped. "You're overstepping your role, Congresswoman," he barked, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. "You're playing politics with a sacred institution." At that moment, the room fell into an eerie silence. Even the court stenographer's keystrokes seemed to pause. But Crockett didn't blink. She inhaled deeply, and in a calm, cutting tone replied, "No, Justice, I'm shining light on a sacred institution that has begun to shield itself in shadows." Her words were more than a rebuttal, they were a warning. And what followed would come to be known as one of the most powerful, unscripted indictments of judicial arrogance in recent American history. She continued, her voice unwavering, every syllable laced with the urgency of someone who wasn't speaking in hypotheticals but from the lived realities of those the court's decisions often affected most. "For you to accuse me of playing politics while you sit there under the weight of gifts, favors, and secret friendships with those who stand to benefit from your rulings, that's the height of hypocrisy," she said. "You didn't disclose those trips. You didn't recuse yourself when you should have. You didn't uphold the transparency this court demands of others." She wasn't just speaking to Thomas now. She was speaking to the entire court. She was speaking to Chief Justice Roberts, who remained motionless, his mouth fixed in a tense line. She was speaking to the millions of Americans who'd watched the court in recent years take a rightward lurch, stripping away rights they thought were protected and hard-earned. She was speaking to women who woke up to find Roe overturned. To voters whose access to the ballot box was being chipped away. To workers whose protections had eroded under corporate power cloaked in legal terminology. Justice Thomas, for once, said nothing. And in that pause, Crockett delivered perhaps the most devastating line of the entire exchange. "Justice Thomas, if your legacy needs to be shielded from questions, then maybe it was never built on justice, it was built on protection, privilege, and silence." The room remained heavy, thick with an unspoken acknowledgement that a line had been crossed, but not by Crockett. The line that had truly been crossed was the one between integrity and influence, and the Supreme Court had been towing it for far too long. The only difference now was someone finally dared to say it, loud, clear, and with a resolve that couldn't be ignored. Crockett wasn't reading from notes. She spoke like someone who had waited too long to speak truth to power. Her tone wasn't theatrical, it was personal. She referenced constituents back home in Texas who had been crushed by rulings passed down from this court. "You sit in this chamber so far removed from the communities your decisions devastate," she said. "But I'm here to tell you, those people have names. They have lives. And they feel your rulings like earthquakes under their feet." She even invoked the very oath the justices take. "You swore to uphold the Constitution. Not the donors. Not the ideology. Not the secret dinners at billionaire estates. The Constitution." And right now, many Americans are wondering if that oath means anything at all. Chief Justice Roberts, still silent, now looked visibly shaken. Known for his preference toward institutional preservation over confrontation, Roberts had spent years trying to shield the court from claims of partisanship. But even he could not deny that Crockett's words weren't born from rumor or partisanship, they were tethered to real documents, real events, and a real erosion of public trust. It was a moment that shattered precedent, not legal, but cultural. Members of Congress had long been deferential to the Supreme Court, often out of tradition, sometimes out of fear. But Crockett's confrontation pierced the illusion of reverence and replaced it with righteous accountability. And it hit America like a lightning strike. By the end of her allotted time, Crockett had not only defended her right to speak, but she had transformed the hearing into a reckoning. The clip went viral in minutes. Newsrooms scrambled to transcribe her words. Progressive leaders called it historic, while conservatives scrambled to dismiss it as grandstanding, though even they struggled to refute her core facts. Back in the hearing room, Thomas shifted in his chair. The weight of the accusations was undeniable, and while he didn't respond directly, the look in his eyes betrayed a realization. This wasn't just a PR problem, it was a legitimacy crisis. Crockett, however, had one final word. "I'm not here because I hate the court," she said, her voice softer now but no less firm. "I'm here because I love this country, and I believe it deserves a court that is not just powerful, but honorable." That sentence hung in the air like a verdict. One by one, even those who had been skeptical of her presence seemed to acknowledge the clarity and purpose she brought into the room. It wasn't just courage, it was leadership. After the hearing adjourned, reporters swarmed the halls. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smile for the cameras. She simply repeated her message. Accountability isn't optional, it's the bare minimum. Across the country, her words ignited conversations that had long simmered below the surface. People began asking harder questions about the Supreme Court, questions about term limits, about ethics codes, about the absence of transparency that would be unacceptable in any other branch of government. Some legal scholars called it a turning point. Others, still clinging to outdated norms, criticized Crockett for being too aggressive. But the majority of the public knew something undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had spoken with a clarity that could not be dismissed. She received both praise and threats. Activists sent flowers. Critics sent warnings. But Crockett, true to form, remained unfazed. She later tweeted, "Power unchecked is power abused." If that makes some people uncomfortable, maybe they should ask why. The movement that followed took on a life of its own. Petitions demanding judicial ethics reform garnered millions of signatures. Town halls were filled with people demanding answers. Suddenly, legislation that had once sat dormant, bills requiring Supreme Court justices to adhere to a binding code of ethics, was getting renewed attention. And all because one congresswoman refused to let a powerful man shout her down. Jasmine Crockett's confrontation with Clarence Thomas didn't just go viral, it sparked a new dialogue about accountability, representation, and the fragility of trust in American institutions. And as the pressure on the court mounts, it's becoming clear that her voice wasn't a moment, it was a movement. America saw what it looks like when a public servant serves the public, not donors, not courts, not legacy, but people. That kind of leadership is rare, but when it emerges, it reshapes the national conscience. Crockett didn't need to shout to be heard. Her conviction carried louder than any raised voice ever could. The truth is, she didn't just speak to Clarence Thomas. She spoke for everyone who's been told to sit down and be quiet while power is wielded in silence and privilege. She reminded America that justice isn't something to be revered blindly, it's something to be demanded, fearlessly. If you believe voices like Jasmine Crockett's are crucial in this fight for truth and accountability, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video far and wide. Let the whole world hear what justice sounds like when someone finally speaks it without fear.